All right, ladies and gentlemen, my favorite section of the muscle notes that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about energy and the depletion of energy and fatigue. And we're also going to look a little bit at the pharmacology of what happens in the neuromuscular junction. So get out your notebook, write this information down in the right-hand side of your notebook. And again, these slides are very wordy, so do your best to condense it down into discrete statements that get the point across and get all the information that you need. All right? Your essential question for today, guys, is if I were training to run marathons or triathlons, would it be beneficial for me to supplement my diet with creatine phosphate? Yes or no, and explain why. By the time we get through these notes, you will be able to answer that question. So make sure you include that in your notes, and you'll do a decent job on your notebook check. All right, which will be coming up soon. All right, so we're going to start off here with the pharmacology of the neuromuscular junction. Now, remember, we talked about the neuromuscular junction. It's the joining of the nerve ending at the axon end and also at the muscular motor unit, okay? That's the coming together of the nerve and the muscle fibers, all right? Our first chemical we're going to talk about is the botulinum toxin. What it does, it blocks the release of neurotransmitter at the neuromuscular junction. So a muscle cannot contract, all right? So remember, before the actin and myosin and all that stuff even gets involved, the acetylcholine is released from the nerve ending, right? So what this does, this blocks that acetylcholine from being released at all. All right? So where does this toxin come from? This toxin comes from bacteria. They're rod-shaped bacteria, and oftentimes they're found in improperly canned food. So somebody who gets botulism, that's a disease caused by the botulinum toxin, is because they have consumed some improperly canned food and the bacteria grew inside of there. What happens, it's a really, really horrible kind of death. People who have suffered from this in the past, die from paralysis of the diaphragm. Remember, the diaphragm is that skeletal muscle that is just underneath your lungs and stuff like that. And what it does is it gives you the pressure gradient that you need to keep breathing. All right, this lady in the picture here is receiving a Botox injection. Botox, ladies and gentlemen, is this toxin being injected into your body. Why would somebody do that? Well, the industry of enhancements to facial surgeries and stuff like that, cosmetic surgeries, has become very popular. So people are doing this so that their muscles are no longer contracting in that area, relaxes the skin, and it looks like they don't have wrinkles anymore. But they also don't have control over their muscles in that region of their body. Ever wonder why certain movie stars doesn't look like their face moves? That would be why. All right, here are a couple of other chemicals that we can talk about that affect the neuromuscular junction. This next one here is called curare. Curare is a plant poison that is found from poison arrows. So some of the tribal communities, they used to hunt, and how they would go into battle is they would dip their darts or arrows in this poison. All right. This causes muscle paralysis by blocking acetylcholine receptors. Okay, so here's the acetylcholine receptors in this picture right here. So what this poison does is it blocks it. Okay, so the muscle itself cannot receive the acetylcholine. And this chemical is also used to relax muscles during a surgical procedure. So oftentimes the anesthesiologist may administer this drug to get the patient's muscles to relax so the surgery can go without severe damage. Another kind of drug that we're going to look at here is the neostigmine. This is an acetylcholinesterase agent, okay, which means it blocks the removal of acetylcholine from the receptors, and so it strengthens the weak muscle contractions of the myasthenia gravis. Okay, so let's put that in English a little bit. You remember we talked about this the other day, that the acetylcholinesterase is that enzyme that kind of chews up or blocks or changes the acetylcholine, okay? So it uses up all the acetylcholine that's in this synapse. Now what this does, this neostigmine is a chemical that slows down or blocks this enzyme, the acetylcholinesterase. Okay, so what that means is we've got extra acetylcholine in that nerve ending, in that synaptic region, in the neuromuscular junction, call it all the same thing, and that just continues the muscle contraction process. Okay. This chemical is also considered to be an antidote for the curare after surgery is finished. So if somebody goes into surgery, gets this muscle relaxer, then this chemical, the neostigmine, is used to kind of get their muscles stimulated again to do what they're supposed to do. The myasthenia gravis occurs when the immune system makes antibodies that damage or block many of the muscle's acetylcholine receptors on the surface of the muscle cells. Okay, that's all that is. And it's just it's an immune disease. Okay. Next section we're going to get into here is the production of ATP in muscle fibers. Muscles are what we use to move our bodies, right? So when we move our bodies are doing work. In order for that to happen, energy has to come from somewhere. So this energy comes from this amazing little molecule, adenosine triphosphate, ATP. Okay, so because of that, muscles use ATP at a very, very great rate when we're active. Okay, so let's look at this. This is our dominant energy pathways for exercise at different durations. So 2 seconds of exercise, you're in anaerobic respiration, which means you're not really using oxygen at this point. And then after 10 seconds, pretty explosive, you get into creatine phosphate, all right? Then up to 90 seconds, you're in anaerobic glycolysis where lactic acid is produced. So this would be like your sprinting and stuff like that. And then after that, you get into aerobic glycolysis, okay? It wouldn't be glycolysis anymore, but it would be aerobic, okay? Which means that oxygen is being used at this point. 3 sources of ATP. Hold on here, I've got a bit of a problem. Okay, 3 sources of ATP production within your muscle include creatine phosphate, anaerobic cellular respiration, and aerobic cellular respiration. Okay, we're not going to go back into the cell cycle and look at all of this stuff in great detail, but you should remember this from your biology class or your AP Bio class or something like that. Okay, so just briefly. ATP is produced whenever glucose is converted into pyruvic acid through the process of glycolysis. And then in the mitochondria, in the Krebs cycle, ATP is also produced. And then more chemical energy is put into it in the electron transport chain and oxidative phosphorylation. All right. And this one, when the electron transport chain gets involved, is the one that produces the most ATP inside your cell, inside your mitochondria. All right, now creatine, which is an amino acid, creatine phosphate. This chemical is produced in the liver, pancreas, and kidneys. It's transported to your muscles through your bloodstream. So it's there, it gets transmitted, and when it's not being produced, we can eat it and consume it in some foods like red meat and fish, but oftentimes cooking destroys it. So if you like your steak well done, creatine gets destroyed if it's cooked all the way. All right, and in fish, if you cook your fish all the way till it's like stringy and white, or salmon if it's stringy and kind of pinky, you've destroyed all the creatine. All right, excess ATP within the resting muscle is used to form creatine phosphate. And creatine phosphate is 3 to 6 times more plentiful than ATP within the muscle. So when creatine phosphate converts to creatine, it releases all this ATP, okay, and vice versa, all right? It regenerates ATP, which the creatine phosphate plus ADP goes back and forth in this reaction between creatine and ATP. All right, so this is a chemical equilibrium inside the body. It has a quick breakdown and provides energy for the creation of ATP, which is a good thing. Creatine phosphate extends a maximal contraction for up to 15 seconds. So it would be useful in sprinting or the 100-meter dash. Athletes that try creatine supplementation gain muscle mass, but it shuts down body's own synthesis of creatine. So this could be a really dangerous thing if you're using a creatine phosphate supplement. The best athletes to use creatine phosphate supplements would be for anaerobic sports. That would be like for sprinting, powerlifting, and stuff like that. It would not be beneficial or for endurance athletes. Okay, so somebody who is a long-distance swimmer shouldn't take this at all. Somebody who runs marathons or in triathlons or something like that should not take creatine phosphate because it's only really good for up to 15 seconds of high energy activity. Now, anaerobic cellular respiration, we're just going to briefly go over this really quick. We're not going to spend a lot of time with it because this is review of something that you have already learned in your past, but this is just to kind of bring it up into your face and say, hey, remember me. Here it is. All right, so just do your best. If you want to in your notes, just write down this little flow chart and skip the words over here, okay? ATP is produced from the breakdown of glucose into pyruvic acid during glycolysis. If there is no oxygen present, then the pyruvic acid is converted into lactic acid, which diffuses into your blood, all right? Then glycolysis, it can continue anaerobically to provide ATP for 30 to 40 seconds of a maximal activity. So you're looking at about a 200-meter race. Okay, that's for anaerobic cellular respiration. Okay, the most important thing to remember is you've got glycogen converting to glucose in the process of glycolysis to make a couple ATPs. It makes pyruvic acid, lactic acid into your blood. All right, and lactic acid is what is the chemical that's responsible for giving us muscle soreness. If you've ever been sore after doing some highly powerful workouts like if you're doing a bunch of sprints, doing a lot of reps with some heavy weights, you'll probably experience this. Push-ups, pull-ups, and that kind of stuff. You'll experience some muscle soreness because of that buildup of lactic acid of the glycolysis cycle. Now, aerobic cellular respiration. Now, aerobic cellular respiration will produce a whole lot more ATP than anaerobic will. Okay, you can render, your body cells can render about 36 ATPs each time a cell goes through this. ATP for any activity lasting for over 30 seconds is going to be because of aerobic cellular respiration. If there's sufficient oxygen available, then the pyruvic acid enters the mitochondria to generate the ATP, water, and heat. Fatty acids and amino acids can also be used by your mitochondria. It provides 90% of the ATP energy if activity lasts more than 10 minutes. So say you're running about 5 miles. After mile number 1, almost all of the energy that your body is using is because of aerobic cellular respiration. Getting past that first 10 minutes is usually the hardest part because your body's kind of working its way through glycolysis and then getting into aerobic respiration. Okay, now muscle fatigue. I've experienced that here a lot lately. Muscle fatigue is something that happens whenever there's an inability to contract after prolonged activity. Have you ever been like in the middle of a basketball game or in the middle of a football game, gentlemen, and you just like every step your legs are killing you, your body is just so tired? It's because your muscles can't contract anymore after being so active for so long. Anybody who has ever ran the 400-meter sprint, 400-meter dash, experiences muscle fatigue, especially if you haven't done it very often. The central fatigue is a feeling of tiredness and the desire to stop. This is a positive mechanism to kind of get your body back to where it needs to be. It's a protective mechanism, excuse me. What happens is there's a depletion of creatine phosphate. It's being used up really fast. And there's also a decline of calcium ion within the sarcoplasm. And then factors that contribute to muscle fatigue are an insufficient level of oxygen or glycogen in your blood, a buildup of lactic acid and ADP, and then there's an insufficient, possibly, release of acetylcholine from your motor neurons. All right. There are several other reasons why muscle fatigue could occur, but this is all we have time to learn. So this concludes our notes for today, guys. I hope that you learned something. Make sure you go back and answer that essential question, and I will see you in class. Have a good day.